this is a myth. Caramel coloring, or E150A as it is affectionately known, is used to standardize color from batch to batch as every cask is different. It's added in such minute amounts that it is not perceptible on the palate. However, many producers are actually beginning to veer away from it. All Scotch whiskey is peated. This is a myth that the Irish really like to perpetuate, don't they? What is that? All of Scotch whiskey is not peated. There are currently more than 120 distilleries across Scotland, and only a small handful of them are using peat to dry their barley. Now, ironically, about 10% of Irish whiskey is peated, and 10% of Scotch whiskey is also peated. So there are, it's funny, right? So there's also peated Irish whiskey, folks. There are a range of flavors to explore in Scotch whiskey. It's not all peat, guys, that's just a myth. Peated water makes whiskey taste peated. Peated water does not make Scotch whiskey peated. Otherwise, every whiskey on the island would taste peated. The peatiness of peated water is removed through distillation. Peat, which is a naturally occurring brown coal-like material consisting of decomposed vegetal plant matter, is what gives whiskey its peated character when it is used as a fuel in the kiln to dry the barley during the malting process. The higher the age statement, the better the whiskey. Age. Age is not the sole determinant of quality. There is a great deal of difference between age, a number, and maturity, character. Age statement on a bottle, well, it kind of confuses everyone. Think for a moment. As if whiskey casks were children. Every child, as he or she matures, learns to walk, talk, ride a bicycle at different times in their lives, right? There's no set date. If your child begins to walk at 7 months or at 14 months, great, awesome. You're happy that they're walking, right? So the same can be said about a cask of whiskey, as each cask is different, has its own personality, and develops the spirit at different rates. What's important is that we watch over these casks carefully to follow their aromas, flavors, colors, and character as they develop, and choose each cask as it reaches its peak maturation point. Age is just a number, however, character is everything. Yes.
90 minutes.
Good Lord, okay. Only men drink whiskey. Can we please put this ridiculous myth to rest? It's 2019. Much of the Scotch whiskey we drink has been blended by a woman. Women have always been involved in whiskey production, from blending to distilling, mashing, milling, and now even coopering as coopers and still making as coppersmiths. According to Diageo, around 35% of whiskey drinkers are women. So let's stop gender labeling our spirits as well as our cocktails, please. Whiskey is for everyone. Some fantastic blenders, right? Whiskey makers right there. And all single malt is Scotch whiskey, and all Scotch whiskey is single malt. Under Scotch whiskey law, there are currently 5 legal types of whiskey being produced in Scotland today. Scotch malt has single malt Scotch whiskey, single grain Scotch whiskey, single grain Scotch whiskey, blended Scotch whiskey, blended malt Scotch whiskey, and blended grain Scotch whiskey. A single malt Scotch whiskey is a whiskey produced in Scotland that has been distilled at a single distillery, only using malted barley matured in oak casks for a minimum of 3 years and bottled in Scotland at a minimum of 40% ABV. That said, other distilleries around the world nowadays are now producing their own single malt Scotch whiskies. These are not Scotch whiskies. However, French single malts like Brand Whiskey and American single malts like Westward are also now being produced. These are also considered single malts. Scotch whiskey can't be mixed. I have someone else to talk a little bit about this.
Hello, Tales of the Cocktail 2019. My name is Doug Johnson, principal bartender at Employees Only here in New York City. I'm here to make you the almost there. It's a little twist on a mojito type drink with Scotch whiskey, Scotch whiskey, Scotch whiskey. So we're going to finger pinch them in, 2 tablespoons of sugar. Press it down a little bit, muddle it up. Scotch, 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 scotch. We have 3/4 of lime juice, 3/4 of apple liqueur, half an ounce of simple syrup. Scotch, 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 scotch. A little more scotch. Finish that off with a little Macallan, a little Spain, just a little roll. Enjoy your Tales of the Cocktail. Cheers.
Ladies and gentlemen, the incredible Deb Johnson from New York's Employees Only, and that is the wonderful cocktail, Glenfiddich cocktail that you're sipping on right now. Thanks, Deb. All right, never add ice to a single malt. Scotch whiskey is a beautifully versatile spirit, and having the option to sip it neat, or with a splash of water, or with a good solid ice cube is a wonderful thing. Adding ice to your whiskey will change the molecular structure of the liquid, chilling certain notes while also enhancing others, making it a very refreshing experience. Now, as the ice cube begins to melt and dilutes the whiskey, the liquid temperature will begin to rise. This will additionally change the structure of the whiskey, further exploring all the congeners, i.e. the flavors and aromas in the glass. So things to consider when adding ice to your whiskey, though, are similar to cocktail making. Shape, size, and quality of ice cube, as well as rate of dilution and ambient temperature will all factor into that experience. So don't be afraid of adding a good solid ice cube to your whiskey so you can enjoy it here in hot, steamy New Orleans. And a single malt comes from one single barrel. A single malt means that it is a whiskey produced from one single distillery. However, multiple casks are blended. Yes, blended, aka married together to create a single batch of an expression. On occasion, a single cask may be bottled on its own. However, then it will be properly marked as such. Oh, you need to be Scottish to work in the Scotch whiskey industry. Georgie, where are you from?
England.
And Becky, where are you from?
England.
And Tracie, where are you from?
USA.
And I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. There you have it. Case in point, you do not have to be Scottish to work in the Scotch whiskey industry. That and up to facts and figures.
This is our baton, by the way. It's the race. Oh wait, we're getting this down. Good job. Good job. Okay, we're 10 facts in. We've got another 10 more. Facts and figures. Number 1. 41 bottles of Scotch are shipped around the world every second.
Really? Yep.
No, I made that up. This isn't called 90 facts and 90 minutes. It's called 90 lies. Heckle away. Scotch is actually the UK's largest food and drink export. For now, and then Brexit will happen, Scotland will leave the UK, and then we'll all be fucked. Basically. So currently, Scotch whisky contributes £5.5 billion to the UK economy. I don't think the Brexiters really considered that when they decided to vote. There's more than 10,000 people who are employed in the Scotch whisky industry, and that covers everyone from the guys who are distilling, the blenders, the people working in the distilleries themselves, in the warehouses, brand ambassadors, I wouldn't say writers, actually I'm probably not one of the 10,000, but people who are employed all across the Scotch whisky industry. It's a massive industry and it's worth so much to the UK's economy. There are currently 20 million casks maturing in warehouses across Scotland right now. They're spread all over Scotland, they're not just in one place, and contrary to some myths where you may think that, oh, a distillery's whisky is matured on site at that distillery. It's not always the case. Warehouses are spread out all across Scotland to minimise the risk of, say, something happening like it did in Kentucky to the Jim Beam warehouse. Yeah, not good. Luckily, we haven't had anything like that in recent memory, so but there was a rumour going around recently about Scotland running out of whiskey. Apparently, Asia's drinking too much of it. You guys are drinking too much of it. We're going to run out. But I mean, we have 20 million casks. maturing in Scotland. I think we're pretty good.
Yeah.
I think we're good. Yeah. There are 128 operational Scotch whisky distilleries. Now this is a fact from last year. It has increased slightly, I think, to about 132, but I asked one of my friends if she would mind explaining this a little bit more for us.
Hi, I'm Karen Betts, Chief Executive of the Scotch Whisky Association. Many people don't know that at the end of 2018 there were 128 operating distilleries in Scotland, but that number is growing all the time. Those distilleries are responsible for producing all of the Scotch whisky on the global market, so much that more Scotch is enjoyed around the world every year than American, Canadian and Irish whiskies combined. More distilleries are open because of increasing demand for a quality spirit with heritage, provenance and a great story to tell.
Thanks, Karen. Incidentally, the first female chief executive of the Scotch Whisky Association. Our next fact is the tallest whisky stills are 5.14 meters tall. Does anyone know the answer to this? Which distillery that is?
Yep.
Yes! Who said that? Woo! Round of applause. It is. It's Glenmorangie. Glenmorangie's stills are shaped so high so that they really increase reflux. We'll get into that later. But Glenmorangie called them the giraffe stills because they're as high as a giraffe and have a very long neck. Yeah, apparently. So actually, a full-grown giraffe is 15 to 20 feet tall. So the whole still in itself is almost as tall as a full-grown giraffe. There you are. I don't think I've ever seen a giraffe in that still house. The average ounce of 40% ABV, that's 80 proof for you guys, whiskey contains 64 calories. Something I've been hearing while I've been in the States lately is that whiskey contains more calories than vodka and rum, and that's why people don't drink it, because it's so calorific. Just completely false. So long as there is nothing else added to that spirit, so long as the proof is exactly the same, it has the same amount of calories. End of story. You're welcome. The largest bottle of Scotch was 228 litres. Go famous grouse! This is part of Nicola's family, Edrington. So they set a new world record in 2012. The bottle is 5 foot 5 inches tall. It holds the equivalent of 9,120 drams of whiskey. So it's just maybe about enough to cover everyone in the room. It was made to celebrate the famous Grouse's 107th birthday, which is an odd one to celebrate, I think. But it actually, the bottle itself was made in a town near Prague in Czech Republic. It had to travel over 1,200 miles to get to the distillery, and Glenfiddich, which was, I think, the famous Grouse. But they actually employed the Czech company to make this bottle because they're the only ones in the world who were qualified enough to make a bottle of this size hand-blown. So from the largest whiskey bottle ever made to the smallest. 1.3 mil. Oh, that's not enough for anyone. I don't see the point. So this is actually made by a company called Cumbray Supply Company. So they're based in Scotland. And you can still buy these. Like they're for sale. You go to the website, you can buy them. So each one of these you'll see like there's a wee quarter next to it. They're 5 centimeters high. So you can buy a mini case of 12 bottles. And there's basically a mini case. 4 bottles of this whiskey would be enough to fill a teaspoon. Which is not really enough, is it? But yeah, you can still buy these if you want to, and each one is presented in like a little matchbox size presentation case, which is so cute. So cute. Okay, we've done the biggest bottle, we've done the smallest bottle, now the most expensive bottle. Oh, this is this is something that recently happened. Bottle, does anyone know what the answer to this is? This guy knows everything, come on. Come and take my clicker. Yes, of course. Bottle of Macallan. So this was a 1926 Macallan. It was bottled at 60 years old. So this was from a single cask, number 263, cask number 263. And only 13 bottles, 25 bottles. I'm a journalist, I'm right, I don't do maths. These guys know how bad my maths is. 25 bottles were created. 12 of them were decorated by an artist called Valerio Adami. Another 12 were decorated by an artist called Peter Blake. But just one of them was decorated by an Irish artist called Michael Dillon. And this one just went recently for £1.2 million. It went at auction in New York at Christie's. Yeah, I don't think any of us will ever see that as long as we're there. No. Oh wow, I think I did pretty well. I think we're out. How do you have that?
Hello. So I know that you know how to nose and taste, so we're going to talk about things around the category of nosing and tasting. So, oh wait, wrong way. Let's do that. All right, so our ability to smell. So to perceive flavor, the brain interprets not only taste, but also smell stimuli. So it's also tactile and thermal stimulation. Now researchers believe that the sense of smell is actually about 80% of your flavor experience. So what's happening is those, the orthosensory neurons are actually up in that olfactory bulb, high up in your nose. It's a light yellow, and what's hanging down are your odor receptors. So you're going to have all of those molecules that crawl up into the nose, and they're all working in tandem. They'll sense in combination what those different senses are, and then you'll come up with your smell. Now you have two different ways that you can actually have the sense of smell. You can have orthonasal, which is through your nose, which is what we're used to. You can also have your retronasal, which is through your mouth. And though we don't know why, your brain actually detects them as different scents, and so that's why we actually recommend that you smell both ways. When you sit in your mouth to be able to inhale a little bit, get it through the retro, and also take it through ortho. Human nose can, ooh, I'm going the wrong way here. I'm so sorry, guys. So human nose, 30,000 different smells. Now, humans have more than 400 odor receptors in that orthonasal sensory area that we're talking about, where they're detecting those odors. Can you imagine? We can detect some senses, some odors at 1 part per million. Like, that's absolutely tiny. So it's really incredible how strong our sense of smell is, and they think we neglect it. Additional fact, at the age of 8, you have reached your peak senses for odor. Like, you are able to smell as much as you're going to smell. You are the best smeller you will ever be at 8. And around your mid-20s, it starts to decline. I mean, no, you should just start nosing things. Like, we should really be telling our children to go around and smell all of the flowers and smell the herbs and spices so that they're building their library. So later, when they do drink, when they're 21, they'll be set. Like, that's what I'm saying, right? All right, tulip-shaped glasses help concentrate vapors. That is absolutely true. So as you have that larger area surface, the wider surface area, so it's exposed to the oxygen, sorry guys, that whiskey, those molecules, like your vapors are going to evaporate by actually having that bulbous base and then coming up into your tulip structure at the top. You are concentrating all of those vapors right into the middle. Now some of those are really beautiful, wonderful aromas, but you're also going to get your ethanol in there, which can sometimes anesthetize the palate. We all know the Glencairn, but there are also some really, really wonderful, numerous glasses now that are being created to increase our ability to evaluate and to enjoy our whiskeys. Tongue map is wrong. It is wrong, it is wrong. Now we can prove this is wrong by just putting a little bit of salt on the tip of your tongue. You shouldn't be able to taste that, right? That should be sweet. Now what happened is actually there was a scientist in Germany who wanted to test how sensitive your palate was around in different areas. Now he was right, you can slightly detect things differently, but it isn't a minute difference around your palate. However, his research was actually wrongly interpreted, and in the 40s, a gentleman named Edward Boring, that was his name, he created this flavor map, and that became widely accepted. It is actually true though, that your mouth, your throat, can all detect all different types of flavors. Your sweet, your sour, your salt, your bitter, your umami. And now up for debate is fat. So, music, yes, it's one of those kinds like fat. It'll probably be the next one. They're saying fat actually has this very specific flavor and taste. So music affects our perception of flavor. So next time you're out sipping your whiskey, just think about what music you might want to have on. Now if you have something that's going to be a little bit more high-pitched, it's going to increase those senses of sweet and sour. It's going to become a bit more vibrant. Now the lower pitches are going to create something that's going to concentrate the flavors of umami and give a little bit of spiciness. Now, also, if you have really loud music, it's actually going to dull your sense of flavor completely. So it's why when on the plane, if you're eating, you can't really taste your food quite as well. It's because of the sound that's happening. There are currently no real psychological or neuroscientific explanations explanations for this cross-modal effect. They don't even know why it's happening, but it is something that we have proven to do. It's pretty awesome. Alcohol burn is like eating spicy food. Now, unfortunately for me, I'm actually addicted to spicy food, so, just saying. So alcohol, especially in high concentrations, will irritate the lining of your mouth. So it's really getting into those mucus, and it's really causing that irritation, which feels like burning sensation. It's the same kind of thing that you get when you get capsaicin in your mouth. Now this has got something that we call chemesthesis. That is what that flavor sensation is actually a feeling. Now, you know that nice warm feeling that sometimes you get as you're going through? What's actually happening is blood vessels are dilating. So, when you drink your alcohol, always in moderation, it can dilate blood vessels, and those blood vessels in your
Tracie, speak up!
Oh, really? They're not too bad. We'll look at that later. So blood vessels impart a temporary feeling of warmth. So that's why you get that nice warm hug when you take that nice little bit of whiskey. That's really your blood vessels dilating for a temporary amount of time. I thought that was kind of cool. Water. We have water in our whiskey, but it actually really does impact your whiskey. So what happens is, as you're adding water, it reduces the ability of the ethanol to hold the hydrophobic molecules inside that whiskey. So it's releasing those alcohols and making them more volatile. So you're able to smell and taste them. Now, it also though will kind of diminish some of the water-soluble molecules. So things like phenols will actually diminish as you add your water. Now, if you use soft water in your whiskey, it actually tends to enhance the sweetness and kind of honeys and fruitiness of your whiskey. If you're adding slightly acidic, it's going to increase the bitterness or maybe slightly briny, peppery notes. And if you add hard water, it's going to add a very unique texture and it's going to enhance some flavor notes. So be mindful of what kind of water you're using. I would actually recommend mostly using distilled water if you possibly can, or if you know exactly if your water is going to be soft, so that you know what to expect. Try to add soft water if you like sweet things. Chilling whiskey suppresses top notes. So when we were talking about adding that ice, or if we were even talking about putting it into your freezer, so it's actually going to suppress those sweeter, softer notes, and what's going to happen is you're going to actually taste a little bit more of that richness, that oak, and that spice is going to be enhanced. But what's kind of cool about it is if you are doing something like pulling it out of your freezer, as it warms up in your mouth, you have a really wonderful array of flavors as that warms up in your palate. Okay, and proof will change your perception of flavor. So I have Dr. Stephen Munker. He is the director from the Center of Smell and Taste at the University of Florida to talk about this.
So how would you describe the taste of alcohol? It's a lot more complex than you'd think. For most people, ethanol has both a sweetness and a bitterness, though the amount of bitterness can vary quite dramatically depending on your individual genetic makeup. But it's not just taste. Ethanol is also a potent chemesthetic stimulus. Chemesthesis is the sensation that underlies the heat of a hot chili pepper, the coolness of mint, or the buzz of Szechuan peppercorn. And combined with taste and smell, contributes to your overall perception of flavor. So when you vary the proof of a spirit, you're not only changing its taste, but you're changing its chemesthetic properties. And that contributes to the overall change in flavor.
Thanks, Dr. Munker. All right, guys, we are on to history. Woo!
Okay, you ready to go with this? I think I'm ready to. Alright, so let's go. The word whiskey comes from the Gaelic Viscavatha, which means the water of life. Now this actually originated from Latin aqua vitae. Well, I mean, aqua vitae is the water of life originally, and unfortunately it was sometimes also referred to as aqua mortis. Yeah. Originally back in the day, actually those who were seen to make it were known as medicine men, and they would take this whiskey and they would infuse it with herbs and spices, and they thought it had health benefits, but it wasn't long until they realised that another one of their health benefits was the little bit of the woozy effect that came with drinking it so much. So, next up, Scottish Parliament first taxed whiskey in 1664. They soon woke up to the opportunity of being able to get taxes and loads of money coming in from all of the distilling that was happening around the Scottish countryside. Back then there was a lot of illicit distilling going on. There was a lot going on up until 1823 actually. Excise men used to confiscate tens of thousands of stills year on year. And actually this was the birth of the excise men. They used to have people going around collecting taxes, and back then you were taxed 2 shillings and 8 pennies per pint of aquavitae. That's equivalent, I'm sorry, I don't know in dollars, but about £14 and 2 pence today. So about $18 per pint of aquavitae. Alright. So this is interesting. I learned something new about this one today. The oldest reference to distillation in Scotland was in 1494. This is when there was a news report saying that they needed 8 bowls of malt burned to make aquavitae for the king, and this was written by a monk, Brother John Core. So I'm reading this off my phone because it's literally hot off the press. So it's now been found out that actually what he was making, this aquavitae, it wasn't for drinking, it was actually for helping with making gunpowder. Yeah, there was a new article that went up on ScotchWhisky.com yesterday, I think, and it's now said that the earliest record of actually making whiskey for alcoholic consumption was in 1505, because that reference actually has references to apparatus, like distilling apparatus in which we're to drink it, okay? So it's quite a new, interesting one that we just learned more about. Another bit of a grave one. In 1815, brothers Alexander and Donald Johnson built a distillery at Lefroy. Okay, Donald, who ran the distillery, though, tragically died in 1847 after falling into a vat of boiling pot ale. Aqua mortis. So the practice of dramming, this only stopped in the 1960s. Does anyone know what dramming is? No? So this was first recorded in 1771. Before the 1960s, if you were a distillery worker, you used to get a dram to start your shift. Now, a dram isn't what we think of as an ounce of like 40% whiskey. A dram back then was this amount of whiskey straight off of the still. You used to get a dram at the beginning of your shift, you used to get a dram at the end of your shift. If you ever did a dirty job, you also got another dram for that. And guys used to walk around and put like mud on their face to make it look like they've done a dirty job to get an extra dram. And we're talking like, 75% new make spirit here. And actually it was reported that the doctors in the local villages used to try and ban all of this dramming because it was breaking up too many marriages. Following on from this, old distillery workers used to be known as hoggy men because it was back then they were said in their lifetime to have consumed during this dramming the equivalent of a hogshead, so 250 litres or 55 gallons of whiskey in their lifetime. And some of the guys were actually known as double hoggies. Yeah. Pickled, we like to say. And on this again, distillery workers used to still whiskey using dogs. So a dog used to be a piece of copper piping, and they used to put a coin at the end of it, a chain on top, and then a loop on that chain. You used to put the loop around your belt, and you used to have it here. I realise I'm away from the microphone. You used to have the dog going down the leg. You used to then walk to the back of a warehouse saying, I'm taking the dog for a walk. You take the bung off of a cask, drop your copper piping in, pull it out, it's full of whiskey, put a cork on top, put it back down your leg, and then walk off and you've stolen even more whiskey to help with that drumming. And it was known as a dog because you kept it close to you, and it was known as man's best friend. Right, half and half, I believe, is one of life's little joys, okay? A half and a half used to be called a nip and a pony, okay? You used to have a nip of whiskey and a pony of beer. A pony was a measurement, and actually I believe a pony measurement is still around in Australia today, okay? The half and the half, the beer and the whiskey, not together, I'm not talking about a boilermaker, alright? The half and the half was actually created for postmen. They used to be able to have the beer before their shift and then the whiskey after their shift, okay? And because I love a half and half so much, you have one in front of you. So the beer that you just got given was the Nola 7th Street Wheat, and that's to pair with whiskey number 2, which is Craigellachie 13, that I'll go through when we get to worm tubs later on, okay? But for now, have a little sip of whiskey, have a little sip of beer, just, go back and forth and enjoy one of life's little joys, okay? Okay, Scotch whiskey whiskey wasn't always spelled without an E, and similarly, Irish whiskey wasn't always spelled with an E. Interestingly enough, in the 1800s, the Irish started to put an E in their name to differentiate themselves. Yet, in the Truths About Whiskey book, which was a really big book written by a lot of Irish distillers back in the day to say that our whiskey is great and we don't like grain distillation and Colab still suck, which wasn't really that great for them actually in the end. They actually spelled in that book whiskey without an E, so W-H-I-S-K-Y. And in 1908, an inquiry into whiskey and other potable spirits report about Scotch that was spelled with an E. But it was shortly after 1908, that the Scotch decided to stick to whiskey without an E, and the Irish stuck to it with an E. Okay? So that's why you'll sometimes see old references in the other way. So Campbelltown used to be the whiskey centre of the world. There used to be about 35 legal active distilleries in the tiny little region of Campbelltown. But by 1934, there was just 2 left remaining. Does anyone know what they were? Springbank and Glen Scotia. Yes, absolutely. Well done. This was due to many factors, including the closure of Drumbleton coal mine in 1923, the post-World War I tax hikes, the teeming effluent, delightful, that turned Campbelltown Lock into a filthy ecological nightmare. Does anyone know the old rhyme about Campbelltown? No, you do. We're going to have to do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Campbelltown Lock, I wish you a whiskey. Campbelltown Lock, och I. Campbelltown Lock, I wish you a whiskey. Whoa, drinky dry. Okay, but unfortunately it was really filthy by the end of the day, and also prohibition, so they went from 35 distilleries to just 2. There we go.
Time check, 32 minutes. We are doing 5.
We're fine.
Right? We're good? All right. How you guys doing? Yeah? All right. We had the cocktail. That was great. Glenfiddich 14 there. Half and half. Cregella P13. Tasting. All right. Let's talk about how we make some whiskey. So easy. 3 ingredients, right? Grain, water, yeast. Any grain, water, yeast. Okay. We'll talk about that later. All right. Water from the River Spey is not used to make whiskey. The River Spey is a beautiful river. It runs through Speyside, right? So it's a famous river. Everyone knows Speyside region. We've all seen it. People go fishing there for salmon. It's really expensive to get a reservation, but we don't actually use that to make our whiskey. Now the water sources that are used, the natural water sources, are streams, rivers, lochs, and boreholes, but there are also people using public water. Totally fine. The water is affected, our natural waters are affected by the diverse geological terrain throughout Scotland. It's pretty incredible. So granite, quartz, limestone, peat, they all affect the water, whether it's hard, soft, acidic, whatever it may be, but that's because of what it's running through, basically. Mashing water, ideally we would like to see a mashing water of 5.5. Now if that mashing water gets a little bit less, you're going to get excess lactic acid. You can also get really off flavors. And if that gets too high, what it's going to do is it's going to stall your fermentation. You can actually do a complete incomplete fermentation. So you don't want either of those. And additionally, what's actually affecting part of that fermentation water is your barley. Your barley can increase that, and calcium actually can stabilize or increase your pH as well. Now, barley. What barley are we going to pick? So you've got to have some very specific characteristics with your barley. So first, we want to make sure it's not white. So we want to make sure that it's under 12%, that it's dried out, that our actual humidity of that is low, because we want to store it. So if that barley is anything over, if it's at 12.5%, you can only store it for 3 months. Or actually for 3 months, but if it's under 10.5, you can store it for up to 18 months. So the moisture is really, really important. You also want to have a low nitrogen level. The low nitrogen level means that you have a low protein level, which means you have more starch. Starch is what we turn to sugar. Yes, we want sugar. So, we also want to make sure that, sorry, I'm a dork. We also want to make sure that we have a consistent sized barley. Because if you've got like really small ones, really big ones, they're going to, as we're fermenting and germinating and all those things, everything's going to be a little bit off. So we want to have a really consistent size. And we want to make sure that that barley is capable of malting. Like, what do we want the barley for if when we go to malt it just doesn't work, right? Okay. So, we actually have organizations that approve and will recommend our barleys. So they recommend these for barley malting for 2020 in spring. Oh, we got 5 now, sorry. We went from 219 to 220. We got up, this is also fresh off the presses because we had 219, we only had 4 2020, we got 5. We got an extra.
We're making sure our facts are so up to date.
Up to date, just for you guys. So, what's cool? So what we're using the Concerto, the Laureate, the Caleb, Sassy, Sienna, and the newest one. Look at this sexy barley. This is the fully approved spring barley algae Diablo. Right? It is now the highest yielding dual use spring barley, outperforming superstars like RGT Planet and Laureates. Oh my gosh, how is it outperforming them? Now it's also disease resistant, and just look at that stalk, you guys, it's strong. Strong stalk. Now it can sometimes develop a little bit late, but there's no harm as long as it produces, right?
Tracie, do you know where the barley varieties get their names from?
No, I don't. Names?
They get the people who make them get to.
Because it's actual frank, that's the
Was
name.
the Diablo created that one, right?
Possibly. And I just talked about the stalk. I don't know anything about his stock. Sorry, I'm married, guys. All right, no, we only have 90 seconds. 90 minutes. Okay, germinating barley. So, yes, we know that it's turned regularly to stop tangling. Absolutely true. So after our barley is harvested and we've approved it, it's really sexy like a Diablo, so we want to go through our malting process. So we're going to get it all wet, we're going to start to germinate. It's going to produce a shoot out of the side of it. So it's going to produce roots and it's going to produce shoots. Those roots are going to come out and they start to tangle up as it's sitting there nicely, like really happy in its warm, wet weather, like feeling like it's spring. So what we do is obviously we have our maltmen, and previously those maltmen actually would turn at least twice a day with their shield, which is the shovel that they would use for malts. They would turn that to make sure that the malts didn't get tangled into clumps. We then changed to salad in boxes, which was just an automatic way to turn all of that barley, and now we use larger corporations like that. We do it in a much more ergonomic and economical way, and much more consistent. So what would happen though when those maltmen were doing it, they actually would get repetitive injuries from that constant shoveling, and that arm with the repetitive injury would hang like the monkey, so that's where we get that term monkey shoulder. See, these guys don't have monkey shoulder though, they just do it for show. That's over at Mulvaney. But you can, if anyone goes to visit Mulvaney and they actually are like in the midst of their the distillery is open, you can sometimes go in and try shoveling the barley. It's actually fairly hard. It's heavy, and I would never. Actually, maybe I would. I would have really strong, great upper body. One day. All right. So any grain can be used to make Scotch. Yes, this is really, really awesome. So actually, when I was in Edinburgh, I came across Becky, which was a 2-year rye whiskey. So rye spirit, because it's not a whiskey yet, it's not 3 years, but it was really, really interesting. So what's happening right now, the people that have actually declared that they are doing experiments with rye are Becky, Brewdog, Brew Claudia, and Inchdarney. Now also, Inchdarney is also experimenting with oat whiskey. So you're going to have a lot of wonderful things coming down the pipeline, and even though not everyone has publicly stated that they are experimenting, I am really, really sure that throughout Scotland and in this industry, there's a lot of really wonderful grain whiskeys, really interesting types of grain whiskeys that are going to be coming your way. Peat! Our old friend Pete! So, peat is a broken down, decayed organic matter that is on its way to becoming coal. So it doesn't get there. We stop it, we take it out of the earth, we dry it up, and we put it into our malting so that we can have that beautiful smoke, which releases all of that beautiful phenols onto our whiskey, onto our malt, which then goes to become whiskey. So what's interesting about it though is that that peat from different areas have different flavors. So Highland peat is going to give you more sweet, dry campfire notes. Your Isla peat is going to give you that briny sort of medicinal notes. And even more impressive is you can get peat from the same region, like right near each other, from different peat bogs, and they will have different chemical structures. So you will take peat from here and here, just across the street, go ahead and distill them, and you can actually detect in the end, in the new make spirit, the chemical fingerprints of that specific peat. So there is terroir in peat. Today in front of you, the number 1 is going to be the Glenfiddich Fire and Cane. We are using a Highland peat to create this. We've been doing a peated whiskey since 2004. We do it 1 week a year, just put it away. What we're doing is blending that peat. It's about 45 to 55 ppm with an unpeated whiskey to bring that down, and then we're finishing it in rum casks. So here you go, Speyside peated whiskey using a Highland peat. Awesome. Now, only certain yeast strains. Let's go on to yeast. We can only use certain yeast strains to make whiskey. So you can't just get your bread yeast and decide to make whiskey at home. Like, not gonna work. Actually, though, Sacrum Arsenic, which is also part of your bread yeast, is in the same family of the yeast that we do use to brew and distill. We've been using it for generations, like since ancient times. Now, what we're looking for when we have yeast, we want to make sure that it's going to be really, really hardy. So yeast dies in high alcohol and dies in high heat. So we want something that likes a sauna that's between about 65 and 100 degrees. That likes to just chill in that sauna. And we want them to hold their alcohol. Like, don't get drunk and die. Come on. So that's the kind of yeast that we want.
I guess a good tip for life.
We also want to make sure that the yeast has low flocculation. So we don't want it to get all clumpy and be like, hey dude, I want to stay with you. Like, be independent, yeast, come on. So when it does that, it leaves more room to actually utilize the sugar that's in there. So that means you end up getting a bit of a higher yield. So that's why we want those specific things. Now, the yeast that we all know and love is the Sacrum Arsenic and been used since ancient times, but there are actually thousands of strains of that specific type of yeast. The most common being used in the distilleries is an M strain. Now, the M strain came from DCL, which is a yeast producer back in 1952. What we've done is we've technologied it. So 60s through the 80s, we stuck with this. We went to M6 in the 90s. MX. MX created a faster fermentation. We're like, wait, faster fermentation, but it still tastes similar. So we're maintaining that flavor that we've been doing since the 60s. We're like, great, that's wonderful. Let's keep tinkering. So we upgraded again, and we got to the Maori yeast. Now, the Maori yeast not only had a higher fermentation, it also increased ethanol tolerance, which was like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. What else could we ask for? Pretty much nothing else. We're working on it though. So experiments are being done throughout the industry with all different types of yeast because they do produce different types of flavors. Right now, we're all using MX, M, some brewer's yeast, but also people are experimenting with champagne yeast, wine yeast, different beer yeast, ale yeast to really play with flavor. So, right? I think we'll talk about that later. So wonderful. M yeast though, most popular, being blended, used everywhere. It's awesome. That's why I didn't say it, because that's me. There we go. And now we're going to talk more about this.
Okay, so we're going to take our three raw materials in this section, in this case, our grains, so malted barley or wheat or rye or whatever we're using now, yeast and water, and we're going to actually turn it into a new make spirit. Okay, so our first batch, and this is in no particular order by the way, so we're going to go straight into fermentation. But a longer fermentation creates a fruitier whiskey. So during the fermentation process, we have a conversion of sugar to alcohol using yeast. The yeast will eat away at sugar and turn it into alcohol. And after about 48 hours, we're left with a strong beer or a wash that we call wash. But the longer we leave it, the more different flavors start to develop. What we have in this mix within our washback is a lot of acids and a lot of different alcohols. Acid plus alcohol equals an ester, and ester is a flavor compound, okay? So the longer you leave it, up to an extent, after this 48 hours of fermentation, the more these different flavors start to accrue. So, for instance, a shorter fermentation time in my rule book is anything under about 60 hours. The Craigella King glass number 2 is about 57 hours fermentation time. We're not looking for many more of these sort of like acid, alcohol, ester conversions to happen. We're looking for more of a sort of a robust character. If you're looking for a fruitier flavor, you're going to leave it over 70 hours, okay? So, speaking of washbacks, a washback material can, to an extent, affect the whiskey's flavour, and this is a discussion that we all had yesterday when we were going through these. Typically, it is divisive. Typically, a washback is made of two different materials, either wood, typically Siberian larch or Douglas fir, or stainless steel. The thing about wood is that it can't be cleaned properly. Cleaning throughout a distillery takes place with an acid solution, a caustic soda, okay? What happens if you put acid on wood? It's going to burn right through. So the only way you can actually clean a wooden washback is by using steam. Well, enough yeast actually and flora and stuff that's going on inside and bacteria, it quite likes heat, okay? So if your washback isn't steamed correctly, you're going to be ending up with all of this residual bacteria that's left in there. And if left too long or built up in the wrong way, it can start to affect the whiskey's flavour, both positively and in some cases negatively. Not all Scotch is distilled twice. Okay? And similarly, not all Irish whiskey is distilled 3 times, even though I'm pretty sure it's still triple distilled, to be sure, to be sure, to be sure. Within Scotland itself, though, a couple of examples of this is Glenfiddich Distillery, where they have a partial triple distillation. Auchentoshan and Hazelburn, where they have a triple distillation, and Malt, which has a 2.81 distillation process, which I won't be going into right now, but if anyone does want to know it, I'll be outside afterwards, okay? That was an old hat of mine. There are lots of different styles and shapes of whiskey stills, okay? When we're looking at distillation, a still is essentially a giant kettle. It's made of copper because it's malleable, okay? And what we're doing is we're heating up our wash inside and we're boiling it up. The lighter, compounds within this wash will start boiling off first and moving away from the heat source, all right? The further they're going to move away, the lighter they have to be, because if we've got all of these heavier compounds moving up, they're going to want to start turning from vapor back into liquid form, okay? All of these different still shapes that you can see here on the screen will affect reflux in different ways. Reflux is this rising up with vapor and then falling back down again and increasing the copper contact. So often we actually have to replace our stills. We generally won't replace a full still at one time. We'll try and replace parts of a still, so we might replace a neck or a little bit of the lie-on or something like that. Depends on where we get wear through on the copper, because these stills can go down to a diameter of about 2 millimeters thick. You could literally, if it's hot, you could push it and you could make a dent within it. I wouldn't do that, it would burn your finger. But when a still is replaced, we're going to replace it with the exact same dent that might have been in it before, because changing this copper structure may in fact change the style of our spirit, but we won't know this until it comes out of a cask in 10, 12, 15, 25 years' time. So it can be quite an expensive and lengthy mistake. Alright, so this is a cool one as well, I think. This is Beckenham Distillery. I went there recently. It's a distillery owned by White and Kai. It's up in the Highlands? And it's the only distillery in Scotland that has these cooling sort of vessels or cooling rings around the neck of its still. Again, speaking of reflux, okay? As I said before, the more reflux you have, the lighter and cleaner your spirit will be. When those spirit stills are running and that vapor is rising up, they want to increase the reflux. They want to increase the amount of vapor to copper conversation. So what they do is they run cold water in these cold water rings down along the outside of the still to try and increase that amount of times that you get that conversion. So the whiskey that comes from these stills with a new make is super, super light and super clean and super fresh because they've increased so much of that copper contact. You all with me? Cool. So, going into grain distillations. The first coffee still, we have 2 types of stills, as Nicola said, within whiskey. We either use pot stills or continuous stills, and the first coffee still was actually put in Grange in 1834. The first painting continuous still, though, was actually invented by Robert Stein in 1827. He put this into Cameron Bridge in 1829, however, Robert at that time was also experimenting at another distillery with this. So actually, the first time a continuous still was put in was actually at Kilbaggy in 1827, and the first coffee still, which was a version sort of added onto that, or a development of that version, was put into Grange in 1834. Alright, and there we go. They're massive. That's all I can say really about them.
They could be stacked on top of each other, but because they would be so super high, they'd probably be the size of, 10 stories or something. So they just separate them out. They separate them out and put them side by side instead. It's simply just one long thing.
Well, we have 2. We have a wash still and an analyzer still, generally, when it comes to the double lots. I did a talk at Tales about 5 years ago on Grain Whisky 101, and my presentation broke, so I pretended to be a still, and I stood and I was like, okay, I'm a wash still, and the spirit goes in through me like this, and then I'm the analyzer still, and it does this, and it was really embarrassing.
Did you turn it into a dance?
No.
That could be a great meeting.
Okay, so speaking of condensers, we've got our spirit. We need to condense our spirit back from vapor into liquid form. We typically use two types of condensers within whiskey production, shell and tube and worm tub. We'll go into worm tub in a minute. Shell and tube is the most common and most modern version of this. And the first time it was put into a distillery was in Macduff Distillery, which makes the Devon whiskey and Glenfiddich if you're flying through airports. And this is put in the 1960s. So Macduff was the first one to put it in from the very beginning. Interestingly enough though, at Macduff, these shell and tube condensers lie horizontally rather than vertically. A couple of reasons or thoughts to this. One is we completely ran out of space. So we had to put them horizontally rather than vertically. Some other people say they impact flavour, but we can't really be sure on which one. Okay. Speaking of worm tub dough, there are 18 Scotch distilleries that use worm tub condensers, and one of those is Craigellicky, which is the second whiskey that you've got in front of you. Please bear in mind this is 46%, so it is a little bit stronger than the one you had before. A worm tub condenser is a very traditional form of condensing unit. It's a big copper tubing that worms its way and coils its way around in a big wooden water bath. Okay. Typically, I've got a picture of it. So typically, to very simplify this, if you're using a worm tub condenser, you're looking for less copper contact. You're looking to create a more robust style of spirit. If you're using a shell and tube condenser, you're looking for more copper contact and you're looking to create a lighter style of spirit, okay? Heavier, lighter. There's a lot of jargon going on within whiskey, so I try and simplify things as much as possible. And this is sort of the scale of how big they are. So again, this is a Craigellicky. Worm tubs are a bit of a bugger. They can leak quite a lot. We found that duct tape works really well at the weekend when we can't get the solder in. We can just put a little bit of duct tape on there and it stops the leak from happening. But as you can see, they're massive. My boss likes to call them our Scottish jacuzzis because of the water in there. And then, so the blue residue that forms on the spirit safe is actually copper sulfate. Speaking of copper again. Why are our stills made of copper? Well, copper is malleable, but also copper plus sulfur that you find naturally occurring within whiskey equals copper sulfate, okay? Copper sulfate is non-volatile. It can't go up and through, it can't turn into vapor, so it creates as a thing and it kind of like drops in. So if you can see around, this is a spirit safe here, and you can see all of the blue around that. That's all of the copper sulfate that's come out of during the condensing stage of distillation. After we've used our wash still and our spirit still, what we have left is pot ale and spent leaves. That's the waste that's left over within the stills. They have to be copper treated because there's going to be copper left in there, or copper sulfate left in there, as a sort of a result of this reaction that's happening with the copper and the vapor and the copper and sulfur to make copper sulfate. Oh, and my last one.
This is my favourite.
This isn't to do with Scotch, but I thought it was kind of cool. Who here likes Mountain Dew?
Come on, we're Scotch drinkers, guys.
Did you know that it was originally created as a whiskey chaser? Yeah? And the word Mountain Dew, the name, you knew that? They call it a whiskey Dew, and actually the name Mountain Dew is actually a nickname for moonshine. Okay, so it was created in the 1960s, and it was known as a whiskey chaser back then. But then when it was bought by Pepsi, I believe, in the 1960s, it was slightly remarketed towards not being a whiskey chaser. Yeah, cool. I'm glad I'm right. I've got a fact check. Now we go. So we're on to maturation.
Oh God, 54:25. What?
Oh, okay.
Yeah? Okay, let's go. Let's talk a little bit about what happens when we take that new make spirit and place it in those casks. So, Scotch must be aged for at least 3 years in an oak cask. Well, back in the early days, how did this come about? Back in the early days of the First World War, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, David Lloyd George, advocated total prohibition of alcohol. but he had to make do with a compromise of the various measures, including a ban on the sale of spirits aged for less than 3, initially 2, years under the Immature Spirits Restriction Act of 1915. Now, however, the merits of maturation, though, were recognized long before, back in 1822, when King George IV visited Edinburgh and indulged in some Glenlivet, long in wood, long in uncorked bottles, mild as milk, according to the Diary of a Highland Lady. So essentially, we've known this for years, but the so-called immaturity of new make diminishes rapidly during the first 3 years of maturation in an active cask. Oh, there are over 600 species of oak. There are over 600 species of oak, as well as many hybridizations as well. However, only a handful of them are actually suitable for cask manufacture. The most common are American oak, Quercus alba, as well as European oak, Quercus robur and Quercus petraea. Now, an aside, Quercus suber also plays a part in the industry. This is cork oak. And going into that, there's someone talking a little bit about what happens as the spirit. Oh, no, not yet. Oh, there's a couple of pictures first, sorry, of Quercus alba and Quercus robur. From there then, oh, all right. One oak tree can make 3 60-gallon casks. Now, one oak tree is often said to yield 3 60-gallon casks. That said, though, it actually depends on the length and the diameter of the log when it comes to determining how many casks you might actually get from one tree. American oak, Quercus alba, again, trees are typically harvested around 70 years of age. However, currently, due to the rising demand of American oak casks, some trees are actually being cut younger, which may only yield 2 casks at most, including the heads. European oak trees, when you're looking at Quercus robur, is usually harvested between 100 to 120 years of age and will yield 1 sherry butt, 2 at maximum. Again, due to the larger size and then the length of the stave to achieve 500 liters. Toasting and charring are 2 very different things. So there are 2 methods of heat treatment that are used in cask production, charring and toasting. Both produce colored compounds and lignin degradation products. Charring is used in the production of bourbon barrels from American oak. The cask surface here is heated rapidly at a very high temperature at the surface at around 400 to 600 degrees centigrade and forms a thick char layer on the inside of the cask. You know how in Kentucky they'll often talk about that char number 3, that char number 4. Now charring tends to bring forward, charring these casks tends to bring forward more flavors such as vanilla, honeys, and caramels, but the char also acts as a filter, removing unwanted characteristics such as sulfurous notes that you might find in the new make spirit. Toasting is quite different. Toasting is used in the production of wine and sherry casks from both European and American oak. The wood here is heated slowly and gently so that the surface temperature is, much lower at 200 to 300 degrees centigrade. Heating times are longer, generally in excess of about an extra half hour, which generally in the end gives no char formation. This tends to bring forward more toasted oak notes and even sweet cotton candy, honeys, and toasted nutty flavors. Cotton candy.
Oh,
Cotton candy.
Hope you're having a wonderful and decadent time. Nicola's asked me to say a couple of things about maturation. So here's something. 3 things happen. First is subtractive, which is taking stuff away that you don't want in your spirit. The second is additive, which is elements from the wood coming in and mingling with the spirit. The third thing, which is the most important, is interactive, where all the flavours from the wood are mixing with all the flavours of the spirit to create something which is new and far more complex. The most important thing, however, is always to remember that age is a number, maturity is a character.
deep diving into casks. So the effect of a cask on whiskey's flavor is multi-layered. It is a very complex thing. There are multiple contributing factors to the development of flavors, aromas, and natural colors. It will not simply be what the cask previously held, whether it be sherry or whether it be bourbon. We must consider the variety of oak, whether it's American oak or European oak, cask shape, size, toasting versus charring, time and temperature, as well as even spirit strength and even warehouse placement. For example, the two whiskeys that you guys have in front of you right now, number 3 and number 4. Number 3 and number 4 are both the Macallan 12-year-olds. Number 3 is double cask, 12-year-old double cask, and number 4 is 12-year-old sherry oak cask. Now, both of these whiskeys are both 12-year-olds, and they're both 100% sherry seasoned. Now, the double cask uses a combination of American oak and European oak sherry seasoned casks. However, the American oak here is dominant. So American oak, as I explained before, grows about 70 years. The grain is much denser, so it'll give naturally lighter colors. It also tends to bring forward more vanillas because of the vanillins that exist in the oak. So vanillas, caramels, honeys, toffees, as well as fresh fruits, sometimes citrus notes. Sometimes you might even find some tropical fruit notes coming from those casks. European oak, on the other hand, again, takes 100 to 120 years to grow. It also contains 3 to 5 times more tannins. And so tannins gives you naturally, first of all, darker, richer colors. It also has an astringency. This tends to give more dried fruits, like raisins, figs, and dates. It can also give more red fruits, as well as baking spices, cinnamons, nutmegs, cloves, or even dark chocolates. Again, the most important thing in the end is to recognize that every single cask is different. No two are alike. I like to say casks are like snowflakes, right? But in the end, what this does is it gives our whiskey makers a huge number of casks to choose from when creating an expression. I'm getting tasting notes over here, I love it. From there, noticing those differences there, right? Yeah, good. So next up is Coopers must apprentice for 4 years. Now, it takes considerable skill to raise a cask from anywhere between 30 and 35 oak staves. This is even more challenging when you consider that they don't use nails or glue nor any other fixings or fastenings used in that process. Now, historically, an apprentice cooper was required to serve some 9 years learning his trade before becoming a fully qualified cooper. This has subsequently been reduced to 7, and then 5, and now finally 4 over time. An apprentice will now likely spend 3 years in a traditional apprentice workshop, and with a final year 4 in the mechanical processes where these are employed. Now, this is quite different from American coopers, who are not required to undergo any apprenticeship or training whatsoever. Only certain kinds of casks create rancio flavor.
I mean, they learn on the job.
Only certain kinds of casks create rancio flavors. I like this. So rancio is a French word. It's an adjective often used to describe certain wines or spirits that have undergone a process of oxidation or have been exposed to heat. The term is synonymous with a pungent off odor. Something slightly, there's often something gamey, so something that speaks of decay, and yet there's like an odd sweetness to them. Think of overripe fruits, earthy ripe cheeses, or mushrooms with a hint of soy sauce. The development of rancio is quite complex and appears to be produced by compounds called methyl ketones. Now, esters, those fruity compounds which are created when an acid meets alcohol, are also involved. It's been realized that all of the rancio tropical fruity whiskeys, though, have been aged in excess of 20 years in refill casks. In fact, in knackered casks where you get knackered casks. All right, so now I'm going to start. So in almost all those knackered casks, that's where you're going to get a low wood impact, but high levels of oxidation. And so in order to produce rancio, get those ketones inside of those knackered casks for a good long rest. In-drink. All right, the liquid absorbed into the wood is called in-drink. In-drink describes the liquid that's absorbed into that cask during maturation. The cask's previous contents have an enormous impact on the additional flavor imparted by secondary maturation, aka finishing or racking. And after just 2 years, up to 12% of a 500-liter sherry butt's contents can be absorbed into the oak. While technically nothing can be added to a Scotch whiskey aside from caramel color and water, those 60 liters of sherry sitting in the oak will eventually breathe out of the wood and into the whiskey. Oh, peat fades the longer a whiskey is matured. So phenols, the compounds which contribute to the smoky, medicinal flavors and aromas in a whiskey, disappear over time in maturation, either evaporating as part of the angel share or being absorbed into the oak itself or integrated into the spirit. So if you enjoy your whiskeys heavily peated, drink them young.
And that's why so many island whiskies taste amazing at like 6, 7, even at 8 years old. And more of them are being bottled at that age as well. So don't be put off by that age thing, but always go for something that's young if it's from
Dive into them. Yeah.
Scented candle in a sauna, like candle waxy, slightly rancio, like puff of smoke over the top, and she just pulled your face out, but actually it's really delicious.
Maybe we should just do a seminar on peat.
Does anyone remember if the phenols were hydrophobic or hydrophilic? Philic, yes. Woo. They like the water. I know you did. Thank you for guessing. I appreciate that.
From there, that takes me out of maturation, and we are on to the future of Scotch whiskey.
Nice one, Nicola. Perfect. So we've gone through, how many is that now? 70 facts. We've got 20 left. And about just enough time to get through the future of Scotch and then into a really fun round where we need audience participation. So stay with us, it's going to get fun. So we've gone through, I mean it's going to get funner. So we've gone through the history, the raw materials, a few facts and figures, production methods, geeking out on maturation, which is everyone's fun part. Everyone wants to know about lignin breakdown, right? But we're going to move to the future now. We hear quite a lot that Scotch is really traditional, we're stuck in our ways, and we're never going to compete with all the other whiskies that are being made all around the world. But actually, the Scottish producers are doing some really fascinating stuff. So we're going to take on a ride in our DeLorean now. We're going to zoom into the future of Scotch. Just don't call me Doc Brown. Okay, so in the future, Scotch will be matured in Kentucky, or Barbados, or Alaska. Yeah, good blank faces, blank faces. These guys are like, when I picked this up, these guys were like, what?
We did the same thing, guys, don't worry.
What? What? Okay, let me explain. There are now distilleries, at least there's one distillery, that is using climate-controlled warehousing. So, they have the ability to control the humidity and the temperature within their warehouses. Now this means that they can produce a whiskey that conforms to the Scotch whisky regulations, but then they put it in a warehouse where they maybe ramp up the temperature. In the Scottish winter, it gets really, really cold, like below freezing. They'll ramp up the temperature to maybe mimic the conditions of Barbados. Scotland's already pretty humid, but they can ramp that up or down as they feel fit as well. That technically means so the climate affects the rate of maturation of a whiskey. So a whiskey matured in Kentucky or in a hot climate like Barbados or even in New Orleans is going to mature a lot faster, and it's going to take on a lot more of that wood character very, very quickly. In Scotland, it's a slow, steady rate. That's why the ability to mature Scotch and whiskey in Scotland, you can do that for 20, 30, 40 years, whereas in Kentucky, where it's much, much hotter, you really don't want to be aging for that long because it just becomes too woody, basically. So in future, Scotch will be able to be matured in the same conditions as you would find in any country all around the world. There's only one distillery doing this so far. Who did you guess? Who did you guess? Which distillery? I'm pointing at you. Pay attention! This is what happens when you fall asleep in class.
Anyone ever guess? Anyone?
No. Okay, well, they hit the headlines because they try to do crazy, weird, mad shit all the time. Who is it? Brewdog. Anyone heard of Brewdog? Brewdog, the brewers? Yeah, so they've started to stay there. So their distillery was called Lone Wolf, but they decided to change it to Brewdog, which makes actually sense. That's their brand. Anyway, fact one, number two. Yeah, expect Scotch made from rice, baby. Yeah, so rice is a grain. We've already heard this, well, we've heard that rice, Scotch can be made from rye, that it can be made from oats, but it can also be made from rice. And it is being made from rice. Just nothing's been released yet, and everyone's really quiet about it. So watch this space, okay? Scotch made from rice. Spirit drinks are going to become the new norm. So currently Scotch whisky needs to be matured to 40% ABV. That's the minimum legal requirement. You can't bottle it any lower than that. However, there have been a few distillers who have decided to bottle products which are lower than 40% ABV. And the reason for that is because, well, apparently consumers these days don't want to drink as much. I don't know why. But well, I do know why. They're trying to look after their health, their wellness, and so on. Apparently in the UK, half of adults now identify as teetotalers or they barely drink, they drink hardly anything. So Scotch whisky producers, they're trying to latch onto this trend, trying to appeal to these people who want to maybe reduce their intake. So this was an expression called White and Mackay Light. It was released just earlier this year. It's bottled at 21.5% ABV. Weirdly though, it's a Scotch whisky reduced to 21.5% ABV. It's the same price as a 40% ABV bottle. So, go figure. I have no idea. Why wouldn't you just buy the 40% bottle and then dilute it? It doesn't matter. Go figure. Yeah. And then I read a story yesterday. There's a new non-alcoholic spirit drink called Celtic Soul, which is a non-alcoholic blend of dark spirits with vanilla, spices, and oak flavours. So that's a new Pernod Ricard product, and that's $31 for a non-alcoholic vanilla spiced liquid.
But we wish them luck.
Oh, we wish everyone luck. Good luck. To be fair, I mean, if people want to drink a whiskey and coke, which I suggest you will do, particularly a peated whiskey and coke, it's called Smoky Cokey, it's delicious. Try that. I mean, there are spirit drinks which are slightly smoky in flavour. If they embody the flavours of whiskey and then you mix it with coke, then hey, that's going to be delicious, right? So why not? Good luck to them. In the future, barley will be selected for flavour and not yield, well, not just yield at least anyway. So currently now we went through the 5 2020 approved barley varieties in Scotland. Monsieur Diablo. But in the future, so all of these barley varieties are selected for the amount of spirit that you can create out of them. So the amount of starches in there that can turn into sugar that we can create alcohol from. But there are so many different barley varieties out there. And all of them can create different flavours, depending on which one you use, how you manipulate them, what you do with them. There are some distilleries which are using heritage varieties of barley, ones which create different types of flavours, and they're using those in small quantities to make small batches of whiskey, which have very different flavours to their main distillery character. They've also, probably these ones my next one? No, not yet. I'll come to it. I really wanted a fun picture for this one. I think it works, right? I'll have a follow-on to that one in a minute, but yes, Scotch will become less Scottish. When you think of Scotland and you think of a Scotch whisky bottle, you think of tartan and bagpipes and, okay, yeah, I mean, no one loves a bagpipe, to be fair. No one loves a bagpipe. I mean, I or die for sure. Scotch whisky will start to move away from these traditional imagery of tartan and locks and Scotty dogs, and they'll start to really embrace just what millennial culture, I hate that word, millennial, apparently I'm a millennial, embracing what people actually want to see and hear. So we'll talk about the provenance, where they're from, the region, how it's made, but they'll start to lose some of these more tired icons of Scotland, which were prevalent in the 70s and 80s, and which, quite frankly, are just not synonymous with Scotland anymore, because we've all moved on. Even Willie's moved on. Oh. Yeah, we'll keep that. Oh no, we'll keep the shortbread. Yeah. You guys get good shortbread here, right? No?
Wait, what? Walker's shortbread?
Okay, next year we'll bring shortbread. Okay, next year we'll bring
Totally bringing shortbread.
Your hair has never had a shortbread.
No,
Have you had it? Who's just not had it?
guys.
Don't worry,
We have to move on. Tequila Scotch, guys. Tequila Scotch. Who loves tequila? Yeah, it makes you happy, right? Yeah, okay. So, traditionally, Scotch whisky has to be matured in, well, what we would call traditional oak cask, which means that there has to be a precedence of a cask being used to mature Scotch in the past. So things like wine is okay, cognac is okay, beer is okay, because all of these products were transported in casks or used to mature these things and then filled with Scotch afterwards, or filled with the liquid, which would become Scotch after. There has been an update to the Scotch whisky regulations just last month. Did anyone hear this? Do you guys know about this? There was a new update.
We're giving you so much up-to-date information, you guys. You're gonna know more than like. This is amazing. This is all hot off the presses.
If you want to stay really up to date with the Scotch whisky news, you just need to go to scotchwhisky.com. That's right, they have their bottles out. I can't show you my website. Anyway, so there's been an update to the Scotch whisky regulations, which now allows for a greater number of products, casks to be used to mature Scotch whisky. So now you can use casks that previously were used to mature tequila, mezcal, calvados, cachaça, shochu, baijiu, and some other free spirits as well, but few bits and pieces. So there are a lot more casks that you can use. There is one cask that you still cannot use, which is kind of divisive among Scotch whisky enthusiasts. You guys are so super lucky because your whiskey number 5 is not a Scotch, legally.
It wasn't.
It's not, it's never been. It's never been allowed to be a Scotch. And in fact, the people who gave me this cask, well, these bottles to pour here, said, yeah, you can't really talk about us because the SWA don't want us to talk about it anymore. But I'm going to let you guys in on a secret. So one of the products which you can't mature Scotch in, one of the casks you can't mature in, is cider. So this is a Glenmurray cider cask finish. It's bottled at 54.3% ABV, so that's 108.6 proof. Maths. It's delicious. You'll get those beautiful notes of apple coming off of the top. If you have any water in front of you, maybe add just a touch, just to like lower the ABV a little bit. I really think the Glenmurray distillery character, which is really apple-y, works well with the cider, but technically you're not allowed to mature in a cider cask. So there will be no more of this ever produced. So you're probably some of the only people in the US that try this.
Yeah.
Full stop. That's it. You're welcome. Do you like it? Is it good? Is this a win?
Yeah.
Should Shall we lobby the SWA to include cider?
No.
Yes. No?
I have to count now. Entertaining.
Will it be party app?
No. It's illegal. It's illegal. It's not allowed. It's not allowed. Right, next. The rise of social terroir. Okay, we talk about terroir, which is like a sense of place. So you have it in your wine, you have it in your whiskey in terms of where the barley is grown. We've talked about peat terroir, so where peat comes from. There will be more influence from the people who make the whiskey, so social terroir. In the future, personal belief, the thing is these aren't facts, right? They're kind of like forward-looking statements.
Predictions.
Yeah, they're kind of predictions. In the future, consumers will start to look more towards the people who have made the whiskey and follow them around, rather than stick with certain distilleries. So you look at somebody like Rachel Barry, for instance. So she is very well known for producing Bourbon. So she moved on from Bourbon a few years ago, and she now works with Benriach and Glendronach and Glenglassaugh. And the uptake from those distilleries since she moved over is extraordinary. And her influence on those whiskies as well is extraordinary. There are lots of other people within the industry. Everyone moves around, it's circular, these kinds of movements within the industry. You'll find people are starting to follow the distillers and the blenders from distillery to distillery to distillery as they move around, because you know that they've got a really, really good palate. And if you are in tune to what they like, then you know that you'll always like what they produce. Yeah, in the future, no one's going to care about age. We know this already, right? No, age is a number. I mean, Dave showed that with a stroke of the beard. Age is a number, maturity is a character. It's all about how mature the spirit is. If you have a really young Islay whiskey, it's going to taste really smoky and punchy and maybe citrusy and fruity. That's brilliant. If it gets too old, if you have a very overactive cask and you put a whiskey in there for 20, 30 years, it's going to be overdone. It's going to taste woody. It's like chewing on a piece of oak, and no one wants to do that. So in the future, no one's really going to care about age. And we're starting to see that with more and more no-age statement whiskies being released all the time. So this is the follow-on from the one that I was talking about earlier about barley. Scotch is going to be borrowing more from the beer industry, so we're now seeing barley varieties being kilned for longer, so they're subjected to more heat, which is how beer is produced. So they malt their barley, but to a point where they're producing different flavours by continuing the temperature. So we're talking about things like crystal malt, chocolate malt, coffee malt, and all of these different type of barley temperatures, barley varieties are creating different flavours. We're now seeing Scotch whiskies which are being produced using some of these barleys which are traditionally used by the beer industry. So a stout, everyone like Guinness? Guinness fans? Yeah? Yeah, I think that's the biggest cheers so far. Mental note, seminar on beer next year, got it. So we all love Guinness. So Guinness is made using a chocolate malt or a coffee malt. So that's where it gets this big black look from. That's from the malt. That's from the malted barley. So there are whiskies now which are being produced using chocolate malt. For instance, Glenmorangie Signet is made using chocolate malt. Oh my god, I have to hurry up. Okay, number one. Highballs. Highballs are the drink of the future. I mean, on a muggy day like today, all you want to do is have like a really long, refreshing drink with loads of ice, loads of mixer. That's a highball. Whiskey, ice, mixer, done. Simple. Whiskey and Coke, JD and Coke is a highball. But we're talking about things that are a little bit more approachable, a bit more accessible. So maybe a whiskey with some soda and... We started late though. Whiskey, soda. She's saying 3 minutes. Sorry. Whiskey, soda, ice, and maybe just like a lemon twist, and that's going to be really light, really refreshing, really nice for a day like today where it's just muggy and nasty outside.
Let's do it.
And that's it. Great. Woo! Okay. Is everyone still awake? Yes. Yes!
Get ready, folks! Get ready!
In front of you, you have got 2 cards, a red and a green. This is for round 9, true or false. So this is where you guys need to decide whether our fact is true or false. She's so excited.
So excited.
Contain yourself. Okay, right. And we've got 2 minutes to run through all of these. So, well, green is true.
It says yellow.
Green is true. Red is false. Yeah? Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
True, false.
I mean, it made sense to me.
We're good.
Okay, right, we have 2 minutes. Are you ready?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Come on. Okay. Only whiskies from Ireland can be peated. True or false?
Yeah.
You have all been listening.
Yes.
Yes.
They drink.
Well done. Right. You should always throw your first dram on the floor.
Do we have this video?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna go.
Richard Patterson.
Is it okay?
It's really
Please go on YouTube and search for a video called "How to Drink Whiskey Like a Sir," and watch the wonderful Richard Patterson tell you how to throw your first whiskey on the floor before you drink it. Oh, pour yourself another one and drink it, so you don't lick it out of the carpet. That's disgusting. Anyway, false. False.
But you just do it
I don't
like
have the
very
movie, I
well.
can't play it. Okay, next. Fish barrels have been used to mature whiskey. It's true. It's true. Think about it. Think about it. Fish used to be stored in barrels. They were transported in barrels. So technically, yeah, Scotch can be matured in a fish barrel. It's a thing. It was done once. Okay. So this was a single cask of sherry matured Brook Laddie, which was finished in a herring cask. It was put together by some mad, crazy Germans in 2007. Look, I've not tasted it. This is super rare. This is like a unicorn. This is a unicorn whiskey. But according to my friend Mark Gillespie of Whiskey Cards, he says it tastes of baby vomit, brine, and stomach acid.
Yum.
Delicious tasting notes. Okay, next one. You can make Scotch whiskey from quinoa.
Yep.
It's a grain. Yeah, you can make it from any grain. Yeah, quinoa is a grain. Pagoda roofs were inspired by Chinese architecture. So you know the roofs on top of the maltings, the kind of the room roofs? That's what we're talking about. I know, I should have had a picture. Okay, so I'm going to say this is true. Now, yeah, this is totally true. So the pagoda roof is an invention by an architect called Charles Doig. So you see those triangular roofs on top of distilleries. They were put there to the top of the malting, so they suck air up through the kiln and up and out into the open air. So it helps with the transition of the heat coming up and drying out the barley. Now they were installed, but they weren't called pagoda roofs. For some reason they've been called that over time because they're inspired by Chinese architecture. Their original name is actually the Doig ventilator. There is a fact for you there. And there is a whole article on ScotchWhiskey.com about the Doig ventilator if you want to go and read it. The Bobby Burns is named after Scottish poet Robert Burns. Guess if you don't know, we've got 1 minute. Oh, it's really new. Okay, it's false. It's not true. It's not true. So the Bobby Burns, well, we don't think it's true. The Bobby Burns is most likely named after a cigar salesman who was also called Robert Burns. So it was created at the Waldorf Astoria in New York, and Robert Burns was most likely, we think, he frequented the bar quite often. So the bartender created a drink called the Bobby Burns in honor of Robert Burns, a cigar salesman. There you are. Glenfiddich Distillery was once attacked by a swarm of bees. I mean, everyone's saying this is true. Do you know this?
Yes.
Everyone's saying yes. What if it was false? It's true. It's true, yeah. I don't know how you guys are this. I was told this in secret. I was told I was never allowed they tried to get rid of the bees by smoking them out, but it didn't work. So they got one of the distillery operators to go in with the vacuum that they normally use to clear up all the flour from the mill. So he went in with a vacuum to hoover up the bees. He went in and hoovered up the bees, and then they were like, right, go down the river and let the bees out much, much further down. So I was like, oh, okay.
Oh no.
So you can imagine this guy, as he's letting the bees out of the hoover bag, like later on down the river. The distillery manager who was telling me this said it was so hilarious. You could see him running along, and behind him was this cloud of white with all the flour, and behind him was this big black cloud of bees just like chasing him down the river. Hilarious. Anyway, yeah, that's your true story. That's a true story. So Richard Patterson, so the guy who throws his whiskey on the floor, he makes the downward, but he actually uses astrology to create his whiskey. True or false? Gonna make it up, or is it real?
Yes.
Far-fetched? Is it real? It's true. This guy's, okay, so Richard Patterson is in his 70s and he's just a staunch Glaswegian, and you chat with him, he's set in his ways, he's very Glaswegian. You don't expect people from Glasgow to really be into their astrology, but yeah, so when he creates whiskey for somebody in particular, he creates a specific style of whiskey. So he made one in honour of Ernest Shackleton, the explorer. He consulted a birthday book to look up Ernest Shackleton's star sign and what the stars were saying around the time of Shackleton's birth to find out his personality, to then create a whiskey which suited Ernest Shackleton's personality. I mean, Ernest Shackleton died a long time ago, I don't think he had hair, but yeah, so there you go. Whiskey that's created after somebody's personality. There you are. Okay, this is the last one, I think. Winston Churchill was given a personal doctor's note to drink during Prohibition. Is this true? Is this true? No. He did need a personal doctor's note, and he got one. Here it is. This is to certify that the post-accident convalescence of the Honourable Winston S. Churchill necessitates the use of alcoholic spirits, especially at mealtimes. The quantity is naturally indefinite, but the minimum requirements would be 250 cubic centimeters. Bless Winston. Now, I don't think maybe